Okay, it's now 11, so I'm going to get started. There might be a few more people that join throughout. Just to cover off quickly, so to introduce myself, I'm Josh. I handle everything screening at the Access Group. What I'm going to cover today, essentially, so obviously we've got the title of the webinar, How to Screen Candidates Remotely During Lockdown. I'm going to cover off quickly, just briefly around the key changes to certain check guidelines. So obviously you're looking around right to work and DBS where the main changes are. We're going to have a look at a few efficiency gains from a system like ours, for example, and how you can actually put those efficiency gains in place even during lockdown. And then what I'm going to actually do at the end is I'm actually going to do a demonstration of how to complete a background check in a lockdown scenario where you're having to do things remotely. And I'll be doing that towards the end once I've gone through the slides that I need to go through. So if I get started, any questions, please ask away. You're allowed to type out questions that you might have, and I'll answer them once we've finished with obviously the slides and the short demo of how to complete a background check. So first things first, obviously the key changes to certain check guidelines. So with us being a business, obviously handling checks, so we provide a system or a tool, shall I say, which will allow you to automate the checking process. We're in pretty much constant communication with bodies like the DBS, like the Home Office. We obviously need to be up to date with this sort of stuff, just like anybody who is actually completing these checks need to be able to do. So obviously the updates around the DBS side of things. So there's been obviously the change, you're probably all aware of that now, where ID documents are to be viewed over video link and scanned images can be used in advance of the DBS check being submitted. Obviously in the DBS, the applicant is still required at some point to present the original versions, whether that be obviously when they first attend their employment or volunteering role or just before. Now, another section of obviously the DBS is this fast track service that they have, which is obviously all around enhanced DBS with a barred list check, so where you're checking the adults and children's barred lists. Now, that fast track is basically you will do an enhanced DBS as you would normally, but it includes that fast track barred list. And what that'll basically do is it will get a result within 24 hours. It will allow you to put that person into work as an emergency fast track check. You'll be able to put that person into work while the rest of the enhanced DBS is, shall we say, completing in the background. So you're not having to wait for that full DBS result before you put somebody into the role. Obviously, that is only available for certain eligible roles. So it's basically those defined as key workers. And things like that. So it's not for everybody. You obviously need to understand the guidelines around the roles that you're recruiting for and whether you can put them through this process or not. But that's just a bit of an update around the DBS side of things. Obviously, things are having to be remote at the moment. So you can do things via video call. You can take obviously scanned images and use those and then collect actual or see the actual documents themselves. When you get the chance to see that person before, let's say on their first day of employment. And then obviously you've got the emergency fast track barred list check service as well. Now, obviously, along with the DBS, there has also been updates with right to work. So essentially with right to work, they've been temporarily adjusted just to make it easier for you guys and all employees to carry them out. So checks can now be carried out over video calls. Job applicants and existing workers can send scanned documents or a photo of documents for check using either email or a mobile app, such as the mobile app that we provide, rather than having to send originals. If you obviously got anyone with BRP cards, things like that, obviously you can use the employee checking service. But it just allows you to more easily do things from a remote basis, so it can all be done with video call. Obviously what you have to do is record the date as you would and mark it with the check that's been adjusted. It's been undertaken and it's due to COVID-19, so you have to almost statement stamp that as well. But these are all things that can be done as an automatic process through a platform like ours. So that's just a really brief overview of the changes. At the end, I will be providing my email address to everyone as well. So if there are any questions around the guideline changes, or you want a bit more information on that, obviously you can go on the Gov website and find out those changes. But I'm more than happy to respond to any emails around changes where I can provide any sort of help and updates that we're made aware of. Okay, so just to cover off quickly, and not to teach everyone to suck eggs as such here, but what is background screening? I mean, just as an exec summary, and the reason that it's important to do is 75% of all applications, 75% of all applications contain inaccurate information. That's a huge number, especially when you're looking at the estimated cost to recruit a skilled worker being over £7,000. Obviously, that can vary per industry, depending on the sort of role you're putting people into, depending on the competitiveness of that industry as well. But that's 75% of all applications containing inaccurate information. When you've got a skilled team of recruiters, whether that be in-house or whether that be actual agency recruiters that are working to get these candidates in, you need to have something in place like this, because otherwise you're putting work into something which is going to have no return essentially for you. Having a system like this as well, or systems that you can put in place, it gives the candidate a well-structured onboarding process, and that basically just means 69% more likely to stay for up to 3 years. It's going to reduce your churn. It's going to reduce the dropouts through that recruitment and onboarding process as well. As you're all aware, obviously, as I mentioned, what is background screening? It's obviously checking that candidate is who they say they are, questioning their honesty and integrity. And obviously, recruiting candidates that aren't suitable, it can reduce in fines. Obviously, if you're looking at things like right to work, reputational damage to the business, antisocial behaviour, you've got your increased staff churn there as well, which I touched on briefly. And if you look at automation, the candidate experience is so much better. You can improve that time to hire phenomenally. It's a quicker process. You've got your audit trails, you're reducing your manual input into that process, but it's still allowing you to stay as compliant as what you need to be. Okay, so as we mentioned, screening is questioning the honesty and integrity of a person, obviously checking their background and the sort of things that they might or may not have been involved in. It's relevant across every single industry that you can think of. It doesn't matter whether you're in the hospitality industry, the health and social care industry, even if you're in just retail, for example. Every single person in every single role across the UK has some level of screening, whether it's just a right to work check, which everyone over the age of 16 who is working needs to have. Everybody has it. It could just be references and right to work, but then you could be looking at more regulated environments where you're having to do your enhanced DBS and things like that. You're having to do ID checks. You might even have to do sanctions, anti-terrorism checks, PEPs checks. So there's so much that you can do, which sometimes people aren't fully aware of. If obviously there's certain guidelines around certain checks, so enhanced DBS, for example, it has to be an eligible role. But if you're looking at a basic disclosure, just for an example, just gives you an idea of that person's criminal history. It might not be something that you need to do, but you might want to do it to make sure you're getting the right sort of person that you want within your business. But it's relevant for everybody. Now, obviously, the pros of screening are endless, and doing the correct checks are endless. It's going to have nothing but good kickback to the business. Obviously, like I said, it's all around the candidate experience and the retention side of things as well. Also, probably one of the most important is complying with the law. So understanding how you're regulated, protecting your business from people that might have or bring bad qualities to the business, shall we say. And that obviously leads me on to hiring better quality people, improving that time to hire as well, by having a decent process in place, and safeguarding and enhancing your reputation. And what I mean by safeguarding and enhancing your reputation, if you look at right to work specifically, the Home Office regularly publish a list which is viewable by anyone. It's on the Gov site, where you can actually see all businesses within your area that have received a statutory fine for having illegal workers. That's not going to blast your reputation. I don't know what is. So if have a look on there, you might be able to see some things that will shock you. But it's worth having a look. You need these processes in place. You need to comply with these things. It's a necessity. It's not a choice, especially with your core checks. obviously complying with the law and safeguarding and enhancing your reputation. Okay. Now, a few things again, covering off your reputation side of things. As I mentioned, the Home Office publish a list of people that they've fined, but you've got to look at social media, you've got to look at the news as well. I mean, I've blocked out some names of businesses around here, but you've probably seen these were headlines. It gets out, the brand is being blasted everywhere, shall we say. If you look at finance director, lied about qualifications, got a job at a recruitment agency and swindled £300,000 out of them. If they did the right checks, would have that happened? Probably not. There were fake documents. You can check fake documents, depending on what the document is. If they're lying about qualifications, you can do a qualification check. You can automate that process. It will fire off to that examining body. It will confirm that that qualification is legitimate. I mean, it's easy enough in today's world. You can get anything off the internet. You can actually buy a full degree, and you can even get nectar points for doing so when you buy one. So that just goes to show how easy it is to do. It's so easy to fake things like that. It's worth having a checking process in place, especially when you're looking at roles where it requires some level of qualification. If they've not got that qualification, the damage that they could do to the business, to other members of staff is endless, especially dependent on what environment that is in. Okay. As obviously you've got your different checks. There's hundreds of different checks that you can actually process. There's only certain checks that you can do in certain environments. So the first thing that you need to do is understand how you're regulated as a business, who you sit underneath in terms of those bodies. So if you're a school, obviously you've got Ofsted, and then you've got the DBS involved in there. If you're care, you've obviously got the CQC, so the Care Quality Commission. If you look at the Home Office, every single one of you on this call, every single business out there is regulated by the Home Office. Everyone has to do right to work checks. If you're in the financial industry, you've obviously got things like the FCA. So you need to understand how you're regulated and the checks that are expected for you to be compliant with that regulation. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to make sure that you're doing. Now, putting a good system in place or getting a good process in place, it's all around efficiency gains around this process as well. So what a lot of businesses make the mistake of, for better want of a word, is they try and do this process really quick to get people into work as quick as they can, get them in, let's get them into work, but they don't have that proper process in place. Now, it is possible to put a proper effective process in place, which is also more efficient than trying to quickly get through people through the door. Now, there's three ways that you can look, and this is why I put this in the efficiency gains section. So obviously a lot of businesses do their candidate screening in-house. They do it manually, or they use various different systems, or depending on how they're doing, everything's being done in-house. Now, it's manual. You've got to do everything yourself. It's time consuming because you've got to do everything yourself. The only good thing about that really is you've got control over that process. Obviously, when you're looking at that from a time frame perspective, not so much, but you've got control over what checks you're doing, how much time you're putting into those checks, to what detail you want to go into with certain things when you're looking into backgrounds, for example. You've then got the outsourcing process. It's normally expensive because there's a people cost against it. So that's when you're looking at managed service providers. 9 times out of 10, it's a very poor candidate experience. I mean, we work very closely with in-house recruitment organisations. One topic which always comes up every single time when speaking about the recruitment and onboarding process is that candidate experience. People are dropping out. It's a poor candidate experience. Using a managed service provider, don't get me wrong, I'm not blasting them in any way. Some of them are brilliant. But if a candidate is used to dealing with you, and then they're going through this managed service provider, then this managed service provider might not work in the same way as you, they might not communicate in the same way as you, and that can result in a poor candidate experience from the differences, not necessarily because what they're doing is poor. So I hope that makes sense. You've also got a lack of a control in the outsourcing process because you're giving it to somebody else to do. So it's hard to report on that. Everything is kept outside of your business. But what it can do is it can improve your efficiency because you've not got people within your business that are doing this. You're outsourcing it. It's not something you've got to worry about. It just gets done by somebody else. What you've then got is this new way, which is automation. And essentially, this is where your efficiency gains come. what an automated process will do is essentially combine the pros from in-house and the outsourcing process, put it into a system, consolidate all your providers, increase your efficiency, it automates the process, and it's just such a nice, slick onboarding process for the candidate as well. With a lot of systems, including our own, you can brand it up so it's your brand awareness, it's your workflows, it's your internal organizational language. So you can really make it and build it out and have that process exactly how you want it to be, while also keeping control, keeping that efficiency of that whole process. Okay. So as I mentioned, obviously, how do you know what to screen for? Obviously, you've got to understand how you're regulated, but just to cover off a few of the main, shall we say, core checks. So, and these are all again safeguarding your business. So you've obviously got your basic identity checks, and an identity check is probably, you're all aware, is basically the most basic level of financial check, just because of the things that it checks and cross-references against. But it just ensures the candidate is who they say they are. It confirms documents are genuine. It confirms documents are valid. When you're looking at things like identity check as well, you can also run MRZ code scans on things like passports, and it just ensures that those documents are legible. It can cross-reference these documents against a police database of fraudulent documents, for example. But checking that person's identity, what they look like on paper, it's not easy to create a new identity on paper. It's not hard to do that, sorry. It's very easy to create a new identity on paper. So checking those documents, verifying the identity is essential to make sure you're getting the right candidate in place and not risking anything with your business. Okay. You've then got your right to work checks, and as I've mentioned, this is something that you will all have to do. Every single member of staff that you employ, you will have to do a right to work check, and this has to be done before they start employment. So it's all around protecting your business and staff from illegal workers. It's adhering, obviously, you've got to adhere to the Home Office regulations, and you're checking for fraudulent documents. Now, a lot of what the Home Office talk about is not necessarily that a check, and what one of the biggest problems they have, shall I say, isn't that the checks are being done wrong, they're not being done incorrectly. One of the biggest things with the Home Office is when you're dealing with international candidates, you're being given things like BRP cards, so your biometric residence permits. Now, they have an expiry date on them. When they expire, you will have to redo a right work check. Now, you can have systems like our own, again, which will give you alerts of when they're due to be renewed. So when that right to work check is due to be renewed, and obviously the candidate themselves or the employee at this stage might not know that that's due for renewal. They might forget. It might just not be something that they're worried about. Now, it's not really your obligation as an employer to let that person know that that card is going to expire and you need a new one to redo a right to work check, but it's in your best interest to do so. Keep track of those things. It might be hard manually. It might be hard to do that if you're using a managed service provider. Get an automated screening platform in place. It will do it for you. It's so simple to track, and it can protect you. Just that one little alert could protect you from spending out £20,000 in a fine. Okay. You've then got things where you're looking a bit more in depth. It's one step further looking to who that person is. And that's when you're looking at things like your criminal data checks, so your DBS, your disclosures. Obviously, you can do this for regulated and non-regulated environments. It just depends on the level of disclosure that you can do. You're really questioning the honesty and integrity of that person. There is some roles where if they've got certain things on their criminal record, you can't hide them. But there is some, you've got to bring that person aspect into that as well. Someone might have done something stupid when they was 16, let's say, and they're now 30 years of age, they've got nothing else. Obviously, you've got to make a judgment from your personal view of that individual as well. But you'll be able to check the sort of person they are, the things that they've been up to. Have they got a criminal background? Have they got a criminal record? It's worth doing. Again, in some industries, sorry, and in some jobs, it's not necessary to do things like that, or it's not mandatory is probably the best word, but it's worth doing these things so you can make sure you're getting the right candidate in place. It might cost you a bit more having to do these additional checks. It might cost you a bit more to get that candidate in place, but is it not worth spending a bit of extra money, getting the correct candidate in place, knowing that you're going to have a good quality hire in place? They're going to do the job correctly. You know the sort of person they are. I mean, that in itself is priceless. Okay, moving forward. You've then got things, as I've mentioned, where you can do qualification checks. As I've mentioned, and here's some stats on screen now, 40% of job applicants falsify academic qualifications. Let's be honest, it's one of those things, when people do their CV, normally the education goes at the very bottom. They think, oh, that's not going to be checked. No one bothers about what grade I got here or what degree I got, whether I got a 2-1 or a first, whatever that might be. Check it, especially if it's a role where they need that degree for them to be a success in that role. They need that knowledge, they need that experience around that sort of workload or work type, shall I say. As I mentioned, you can buy a degree. You can buy a degree online and you can get nectar points for doing so. So check it. It's worth checking, especially if you're in a role or you're hiring for a role where they need that sort of level of education. And that also touches on not just academic qualifications, but professional qualifications as well. Whatever that might be, check them. They're easily falsified. Moving on, obviously you've got referencing. Referencing has changed, as you're probably all aware. It's not really the exercise that it used to be of providing all information around why you might or might not want to rehire that person or how good they were as an individual. It's more of a tick box exercise now, checking that they worked this date to this date in this job role. It's worth doing, 100% worth doing, because if you're looking at somebody, obviously people make mistakes on dates that they might work, but check the dates that they work, check that they were in that position. Again, easy to falsify. I know pretty much every business recruiting for most roles will do some level of referencing, whether that be character referencing, whether that be employment referencing, but it's a simple process. You need minimal information, just get it done, to be quite frank. It's something that will just make the process so much easier. It's not hard. You can ask for additional information if you want to, especially if you've got an automated platform like Access Screening. You can build your entire referencing template into the system and it'll automate the whole process for you. You won't have to touch referencing again. Okay, so covering off obviously those wide high level bits of information, we've now got onto the actual automation of this process, the new way, shall we say, the new more efficient way. Again, touching on those efficiency gains. Now, with your efficiency gains, obviously you've got to still ensure that checks are thorough. You've got to understand what you need to screen for. You've got to review your old policies, and you can automate that process. And if you see that big stat on the right hand side, 60% of candidates will abandon a complex online application. So if you automate that process, you can just build it as a nice, slick, easy onboarding process. They'll get through it, no problems at all. What you've got to do though is when you're putting in a process like this or getting a system in place, you've got to review your old policies. There's always going to be a review needed for something like this to make sure that you're still staying compliant, you fully understand what you're screening for and why you're screening or doing those certain checks, but also creating those efficiency gains at the same time. Now, with Access Screening, just to cover off a bit of high level info around this before I actually jump into the main system. So it's a pre and post employment compliance platform, and this is where your efficiency really comes into play. Not only is it going to automate and keep track of everything you need to do pre-employment, it does it for you post-employment. If you're having to renew DBS, it will keep on top of things like that for you. When you're having to redo right to work checks, when obviously they go out of date, if you're dealing with BRP cards, it will keep on top of it for you. It's configurable, they're cloud-based systems, it will improve your visibility and control over background checking process. If you're doing things manually in-house at the moment, you've obviously got that visibility, but it's a manual visibility. You've got to go in, it's probably spreadsheets. This will log it all for you. Click of a button, you've got a full audit log of everything that's happened. Click of a button, you can see all the checks that you've done over the past year. It's going to reduce your manual admin, it will create savings to the business from a time and cost perspective. And as I've mentioned, candidate experience, candidate experience, candidate experience. This will enhance the candidate experience. It's a slick onboarding process. It will reduce that time to hire, as a fact. We've also got, and when you're using a system like this, you've got your third-party integrations, so you can access all your supporting data without needing to use any other supplier. We've got a direct integration with the DBS, with the DVLA, with leading credit agencies. When you're looking at things like your sanctions checks, where you're doing anti-terrorism and PEPs, We've got integrations and links into basically those bodies like the EU, OSTRAC. You name that register, we've got a link to it. And what it will allow you to do is consolidate all the providers you're using at the moment into one system, so it's one true point of information also. As I've mentioned, you get automatic alerts of when things might be due to expire. It's cloud-based, it's anytime, anywhere access. So that's PC, tablet and phone. That's for you and that's for the candidate as well. And having a system in place like this, it is best practice and it will help protect and support your company's reputation. Now, moving forward from that, what could that look like as a process? Okay, so what that might be able to look like if you have an automated process in place. So you've got that candidate, they apply for that role. Obviously, it's a bit different nowadays. So I've got there that the candidate arrives for an interview and provides documentation for checks. Obviously, that can all be done over video link now, and that can all be done via our portal where the candidate can upload all the details and all the documents. We have a right to work app, so you can do an instant right to work check, which is completed in person via the mobile app. Obviously, at the moment, that can be done remotely via video call. The candidate then, for example, is offered a role subject to the result of background checks. What that will do is kick off the process where the candidate will be sent a portal where they have to enter their details, and this is a tailored candidate portal. The candidate then gives consent to their data being used for obvious reasons. The background checks are automatically begin. The hirer just monitors the progress, is alerted to any red flags, which you can then obviously action as you see fit. What you'll then receive as a hirer is a candidate report for review, where you can see all the results of all checks, and then you can make an educated decision on whether that person is fit for work within the role that you're talking of. Okay, it's such a simple process. It's an automated process. What that might look like if you're doing things manually is the candidate applies for a role, they come, they provide you with documentation. What you've then got to do with the right to work documentation is scan that. Once it's scanned, you've then got to sign that, you've got to statement stamp it, you've got to date and time stamp that as well. You've then got to find somewhere to save that, where it's going to be safe, it's not going to go missing, but you've got to sort of find a suitable place to save that. What you're then going to do is you're going to offer that role to that candidate. You've then got to get all their information to complete the checks that you need to complete. You've got to manually chase these checks, you've got to manually chase references. You're not just monitoring that progress, you are fully involved in trying to manually progress that. And then what you've got to do is manually collate all that information, try and get everything together, fit it together so it all makes sense, and then make a decision. This automates that process. Okay. Moving forward, when you have systems in place, like an online automated platform, you've got different things that you can integrate with. If you get your candidates to pay for DBS, they can pay at the point of filling out the DBS form. Now, it's just going to increase your cash flow. You can directly collect payment for candidate disclosures. You've got control over what the candidate pays. You can, obviously the payment details are deleted on successful transaction, but you can just add extra little bits into the process like that. If I then move forward, you've then got things like the right to work app, and I did mention this briefly, but we've worked really closely with the Home Office. We've got this bang on. It follows the Home Office guidelines to a T. It will support your statutory legal excuse. It's tailored for non-expert mobile users. It's fully integrated into the main form. It will automatically date and time and statement stamp things for you, so you haven't got to do it. You've not got to manually scan things in, because you can take a picture of the document through this mobile app, and you can actually use this app to complete an MRZ scan, so you can check that document against a police database of fraudulent documents. This will all go back into the main screening platform, so you've still got that one version of truth. You've got your audit logs, you can report on the process. It's iOS and Android compatible. All content is encrypted within the app. Nothing is stored on users' mobiles for obvious reasons. You can add different chains of approval in there if need be. So it gives you full control over that process while making sure you stay compliant and having that one true point of data. Now, that's just a quick high-level overview. Let's get into it. So how do you actually complete a check remotely during lockdown? And what I'm actually doing here is I'm showing you this through Access's system. So through Access screening, how you would complete a check remotely during lockdown. So if I just come out of my PowerPoint quickly and I come into my browser here. So this is Access screening. I'm just going to log in quickly. Now, What you'll need, and all you need to start a background check, is the candidate's email address and their name. Okay, so this is just an overview page. I'm not going to go into what everything on here does. Obviously, if any of you like the look of this and want to have a further demonstration or a further conversation around this, please reach out to me. As I said, my email will be at the end of the webinar. But what you would do through Access the System, you would have created workflows, which are specific sets of checks. Now, if I click Start a Background Check, this screen will pop up where I've got to start a new background check. If I click this drop down, I've got my access screening demo here, which is just for all core roles within the business. I've got these tags which have popped up on the side, so I can assign any tags to this. I've got a candidate start date. You can do numerical tags, preset tags, regular expressions, so where they'll only follow a certain format, for example. I need the candidate's email, their title, if you want to put that in, it's not mandatory, their first name, their last name. If you know their mobile number, enter it there because they need it to log into the portal. If you don't know it, don't worry about putting it there. The system will automatically ask it from the candidate anyway if you don't know it. If I then scroll down, if it's an existing employee, you've got a drop-down box and a search for that employee. You've then got your target completion date. If I just whack that a while in the future so I don't get constant reminders chasing me to complete my my portal. And then you've got things like employment history timeline. Now, employment history timeline is just if you might only need 5 years worth of referencing, for example, and you can set up those rules in the back-end configuration side of this platform. But you might want to get an overview of what that candidate has actually been doing since they first entered employment. If you know the date they started employment, enter it there. If you don't know it, the system will automatically ask the candidate for it anyway. What I'll do is I'll start and notify that candidate. Now that I've started and I've notified that candidate, this screen has popped up, which is their background check file, shall we say, at this stage. Now, on here, there's not much that I can do at the moment, and it's because I've not got the candidate's consent, okay? I can see the candidate's progression through the portal, but essentially what I'm having to do is I'm having to wait now for that candidate to complete that portal, enter the relevant information. So the automation has started already. If I jump into my emails, if I come on to my requests and I come onto this email here, this is an example of an email that a candidate could receive. Now, every word that you see in this email is configurable by you. All the color schemes, all the logos are configurable by you. It'll be your brand, okay? And this is all a candidate experience. Now, as a candidate, I'm going to click this link. That will then link me automatically to my portal. The first thing that I've got to do is I've got to sign in. So if I put my number in there, click continue, it will ask whether I want to receive my code, my verification code, via a text or via a phone call. If I click text, it will then send me a code. Obviously, this is a demo system, so it will just give me a code. I enter that. The first thing I'm going to see is any GDPR agreements that you might need me to see, where my information is going to be shared, any privacy policies, right to object, status object rights processes, I can agree or I cannot agree. If I choose not to agree as a candidate, what that will actually do is it will flag that up in the main platform for you. It will tell you why that candidate, so it will ask the candidate for a reason as to why not. It will restrict the processing of any of that candidate's information. And then obviously you can resolve that and action that as you see fit. But if I click agree here, it's then going to take me into the main part of my portal. Now you can see here I've got steps 1 to 11. That could be steps 1 to 3, it could be steps 1 to 7, 8, 9, 15, whatever that might be, dependent on your level of compliance. Now, one thing to note here as well, if I just click F12 quickly, it's fully mobile compatible. If you've got a candidate who's coming for an interview, just as an example, in any world, or they've just been on a video interview with you and they're just sat on their mobile phone, they can work through this on their phone. So it's fully mobile compatible. So what I'll now be doing, you can add any obviously introduction that you might need here. The first thing I'm going to need to do is enter any name and contact details that you might not already have on me. Okay, so my name, my email address, things like that, it's going to have dragged over because that's all information that you've already got on me. And we've got open-ended APIs with this system. So what you can actually do is integrate it with any HR or recruitment ATS or recruitment CRM that you might have. Okay, so they need to know my gender, so I'll put my gender there. They need my date of birth, so if I just whack my date of birth in there quickly. You've got nationality, if you need that. You've got national insurance number, if you need that. if they've ever been known by any other names. If you're processing a DBS on them, that's something you need to get, whether they've ever been known by any other names or not. You've then got contact details. My email, you already know it. Is the number that I use to log into this portal my contact number? It is. I've just got a handy little link there. And then you've got your employment history if you need to know my full employment history. If you don't, that won't be there. If I then save and proceed, I'm onto my address history. Now, what you'll notice, guys, is as a candidate working through this, address history, academic references, employment references, gap history, it's all the same timeline view. It's just a nice, easy, slick onboarding process. It's so easy to get through. You choose what's mandatory through here, what's not mandatory through here. You've got these blue boxes at the top, and you can put in there any guidance, any information that you might need the candidate to see. Now, if I add an address quickly, it's going to give me my postcode lookup. If I click find my address, it's going to give me the drop down box. If I select my address, it's then going to give me the detail of that address. I've then got my from date and my to date. I'm just going to fill in the entire gap for the purpose of this demo. And obviously, if the candidate was working through this and they've always lived at that address, they can fill the entire gap for ease. But if I save that, you can then see it's satisfied the previous 5 years of address history. My address is there. I can now save and proceed. And as I'm working through this, everything that you see, and you're choosing whether you make it mandatory or not. You've got your academic references. It's the exact same process to add a reference. Go to employment references. If I actually add a reference here, you've got the organisation. Let's say I work at Access. You've got the department. Let's say I was in HR and I was a HR advisor. Okay. I'm then going to add my employment dates. So again, I've got my from and to dates. If I've always worked at this company, I've then got this little link there, which will fill in the entire timeline for me that you've requested. I've then got to proceed to the referee details. So if I go onto here, I'm going to put that as John. Let's do John at access.com, his contact number, the organisation. You've then got the department that he was in and the referee's position. If I then save that, that's then going to populate that timeline. You can see all the information there of that candidate's referee information. I can even, as a candidate, upload additional documents, supporting documentation that I might need you to see. If I save and proceed, you've then got your gap history. Again, the same timeline view. It's such a nice, easy, slick onboarding process. If I then save and proceed, you've got things like personal references. You've then got additional questions. So you've got things, we've got 3 different types of questions that you can use within here, okay? We've got dynamic questions, that's an open-ended text box question. You've got static questions, which are multiple choice tick box questions. And you've got conditional questions, and these are just reactive based on the answer. So the question here is, do you suffer from any medical conditions? If I click no, that's the end of that. If I click yes, it will then open up another question asking me to provide more information on that. You've then got supplied literature. So through this portal, you can give the candidate remotely any document that you might need to give them. You can even make it mandatory, as I have here. I have to download that document and the candidate has to acknowledge they've received that document. So you're giving them all these documents remotely. If I save and proceed, you're then onto your documents and forms. So this is where you're getting the candidate to give you all the documents, scanned images of all documents that you might need. And it's being done remotely. It's all remote. It's so easy and simple to do. So this is a way for you to collect those documents, complete the check, and then what you can obviously do and you need to do is collect the actual documents or see the actual documents before they start employment or on the first day of employment. But what this will allow you to do is collect and complete the checks you need to do completely remotely. So I can download files, complete and upload files. I've got basic uploads. We've got a full DocuSign integration. You can even get all of your candidates. If you're taking them on board, you can run your contracts through this, your contracts of employment. You can do it all remotely. If I click sign now, because it's something that I've made mandatory, it will load up a DocuSign wallet. Once that's loaded, I'll click start. It will then take me into that DocuSign wallet. Obviously, the first thing I've got to do as a candidate is consent to using electronic records and signatures. If I click that and click finish, what I've then got is my sign page. I've got this sign area here. It will adopt a signature based on my name. Obviously, if I'm using my phone, I can just sign this with my finger as I'm walking through. If I adopt and sign, once that's signed, if I click finish, it will then drag that signed document, that could be a signed contract, back into the portal. You've got that signed document there, it's notified that it's signed. I can now save and proceed. What you've then got is the review and submit section. So this is all the basic high level information that you need in when you're looking at references and things like that. And then obviously after this, you'll move on to the third party checks. So what the candidate can do here is they're overviewing all the information that they've given you, making sure everything's correct. I can see my address history, my references timeline, my employment references, my uploaded documents, signed documents, just making sure everything is okay. I've then got any additional candidates' terms and conditions which I need to agree to, that you might need them to agree to, and then you're on to your third-party checks. That's when you're looking at things like DBS. Now, obviously, this is a demo system, so I'm not going to fully complete a DBS here for obvious reasons. It will be false information. However, if I proceed to the first check, which is an enhanced DBS, and this is all candidate experience, so keep that in mind. Obviously, I've got to say that I've read and agreed to the standard enhanced check privacy policy, and then whether or not I'm going to consent to the DBS providing an electronic result directly to the registered body that has submitted the application, which would obviously be you. If I click yes and click proceed. What you've then got is option 1, option 2. So that's where you're looking at update service or non-update service. Now I'm going to go on option 2, saying I do not have a DBS certificate. If I click proceed, what you've then got is your statements of fair processing and the principles behind it, and then you've got all the information that you need to provide. It's essentially a DBS form. Any information gathered through the previous steps 1 to 11, which is relevant to this, it will drag over. They've not got to re-enter information they've already entered. So my basic information, my contact details, date of birth, email address, my names, they've dragged over. Obviously, as I mentioned, other names, which is in section 2, if I'd entered another name, it will drag over. But this is where I've just got to actually edit the details of the actual documents themselves. So I'm providing passport numbers, driver's license numbers, and things like that in supplied documents, documents and forms, sorry. That's where I'd have uploaded actual images of these documents for you to be able to use in the ID verifying process. But what I would do as a candidate is I would add all the information. Obviously, you've got your valid from dates, expiry dates, passport numbers, driver's license numbers, providing all the relevant information. Once I complete that, I'd get a little thank you message, and that is the candidate's process done. If I jump back into the main screening platform, if you can see, that has now all changed. Now, all of that information that the candidate has entered has now come back into this main background check file. From here, I can see all the data checks which are going to be processed. I can see there's an enhanced DBS, there's a DVLA check, there's a HCPC check there as well. You've got your requested at date and time, you completed at date and time when that happens. You've got the status of each of those checks. They're sat at waiting for candidate at the moment, because as you've seen, I've not completed that bit of information. You've got the timeline of that candidate's references. You can go in and view the reference details. I can see here that they've acknowledged they've received that document. I've got proof of that. I've got all the answers to all the questions. You can see here, there's all these documents which are outstanding. I made them so they could be uploaded through this candidate's portal, but they weren't mandatory. The system knows they weren't mandatory, but it's letting me know that they've not been uploaded. I can see I've got a reference, but it's not been responded to. It's not satisfied. Now, in the background, what the system will be doing is automatically chasing that referee via their email address, and it will keep chasing those in specific time frames, which are set parameters you make. So it'll be automatically chasing a referee at this point for a response for them to complete the referee form. Now, what your job is at this stage is to overview this process. You've got to check all the documents, just make sure that they're okay. You've got to accept or reject references, for example. You're choosing whether you include or exclude them from the report. Once everything has been completed, you can download a PDF report. However, before I do that, if I just jump into my management tab, let's say you process an enhanced DBS. All that information, all that candidate's enhanced DBS documentation has come through the portal. If I come into my disclosure management tab here, I can see that I've got a pending ID verification. I can see who the candidate is, what level of disclosure it is, the brand that it's a part of, the date that it's created, the date that the candidate submitted it, and then I've got an ID verify button there. If I click that, the system will automatically walk you through and hold your hand through what you need to do to verify that candidate's ID for the DBS. I'm not going to click that, and the reason I'm not going to click that is because the information is false, and the system will pick up that the information is false. So, for example, my date of birth in there is wrong. It's a different date of birth, and I've just entered a false driver's license number. It was just to go through, and so that was in the system essentially. Now, obviously, your driver's license number, it includes part of your date of birth. It will pick up that they're different. So any altercations like that, any differences, it will let you know. So you're not ever going to send any false information to the DBS. It won't let you do it. Now, once you've verified that ID, it will fire off to the DBS. Obviously, it will complete the check, and then it will bring back the result. If I come into my background checks tab here, if I come into completed checks, I come onto this check which is completed. From here, I can see my disclosure identity details because this has had a completed enhanced DBS. I can see here the status. We've got completed checks here. I've got my DBS enhanced. If I click view, I can see the result of that DBS. I can see this one is clear. There's no convictions. There's no offences. Okay. And that is how you'll do it. That is how you'll correctly do it remotely using a system like this. Okay. So you start the check. The portal goes to the candidate. When the portal is with the candidate, your job is just to wait for that information to come through. The system will automatically chase the candidate for you if they've got no response. Once they've completed the relevant information, their background check file will update with all the information. What you'll then have to do is verify the identity if you're doing things like DBS checks. Obviously, if other checks are happening, which are automatic, like your DVLA, obviously it will automatically fire away and things like that. It will then come back into the system. You can view, so you can make sure that those checks have the result that you need them to have. And then what you can do, as mentioned, is generate that PDF report. So if I download a report, download a background check standard PDF document, and this will be the result of all checks, all the candidates' information. So if I jump into this, it will be all logoed up to you as well, so it will look and feel like you as a brand. And then you can see all the candidates' information, the results of the checks, the references that have been taken, that signed contract can be included in there, anything you might need. And then you've got that, you can store that against a HR system, for example, and you've got proof that you've done what you need to do. It's as simple as that. It's so easy to automate the process and do it remotely when you have a system in place like this. Now, I hope that's kind of covered it all off for everybody. And obviously shown you the best way to do that essentially, and how easy and efficient that can be. My contact details, if I just bring those up quickly, are on screen now. So if anyone wants to take my email address down, if you have any questions, please drop me an email. I'm happy to respond. As I mentioned, there has been a few questions, so I'm just going to answer a few questions that have been asked. I'll only do 2 or 3. Just for obviously time perspective. But we've got a question here. So the question is, how would you keep your customers up to date with changes in guidelines around certain checks, like the DBS, for example? Okay, brilliant. So we're in constant communication with the DBS. We're in constant communication with bodies like the Home Office. If I just come back into the actual screening platform quickly, if you can see, we've got this product notifications tab here. If I click on that, everything that changes around guidelines, all of our customers get updated in this real time. You will have access to phone and email support, but we will update you to all checks around any legislative changes, around any guideline changes. We will update you in the system real time, and you will be alerted to that. So you've not even got to give us a call. We've not got to email you. You've not got to email us. You can find out all this information through our actual platform. I hope that answers the question okay. We've got another question here. How long will the DBS guideline changes last for? To be honest, how long's a piece of string? It's a difficult question to answer. It's ongoing at the moment, and I believe it's going to last until at least the end of the calendar year, I believe. Don't quote me on that. That's not a dead set of when that's going to end. It could go on for longer, it could end sooner. But we're kind of at the mercy of the DBS from that perspective on when they're actually going to lift these changes. And obviously it's all down to how we get on with COVID and the lockdown, essentially. And one more question, if I just have a quick look through. Okay, this is a good one. So what actual tangible efficiency gains can be seen from implementing a system like this? Okay, huge and instant efficiency gains. Now, it will save you so much time. It will reduce your time to hire. You will be able to see an obvious reduction in your time to hire. Now, what I'll be able to do, or what one of my colleagues will do, is they'll send obviously a follow-up email, and we'll include in that a case study of a client of mine. They were called Premier Care. Now, they were doing everything manually. They were doing this all manually. They've implemented access screening. They've reduced their candidate turnaround time, so they've reduced their time to hire by 2 weeks by implementing this system. Now, that's a phenomenal saving. That's 2 weeks of getting that person into the business, working and generating revenue for the business. Simple as that. And that's really all we have time for today, guys. Like I've mentioned, if I just bring up my contact details again, so they're on screen for everyone, please give me an email if you have any additional questions, or if you want to look into this a bit further. I hope I demonstrated well enough there, or it made sense on how you would process that check and do that remotely using a system like this. And I hope I answered the questions that have been asked. But we'll call it a day there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As I mentioned, please give me an email if you have any questions. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.